People say to me, Simon, how come you don't have to work? I said, well, I do work. I've got my properties, I've got my... No, you don't go to work.
When I decided to do this, I knew instantly who my first guest would be, and it's the fantastic Mr. Simon Zutshi. So welcome, Simon.
Thank you, Kevin. That's very kind of you. Really pleased to be here on your first edition.
The reason I wanted to choose you is because we've known each other for such a long time
We
now.
have, yeah.
And I immediately resonated with your style, your integrity.
Thank you.
And that really hasn't left me. And we've got a brilliant relationship between ourselves and your business. So tell us about your business.
Yeah. Well, I have a number of different businesses, as most entrepreneurs do. My main business, well, I've sold it. The main business I'm occupied most of the time with, which I'm CEO of still, is Property Investors Network and Mastermind Principles Limited. So PIN, Property Investor Network, is a networking organization. We created the very first networking specifically for property investors anywhere in the UK back in 2003. And that's now grown to 50 meetings around the country, also overseas in the Netherlands and also in Dubai. And then that's kind of linked very strongly to used to be my business, the training business, all about teach people how to invest in property. We don't sell any properties. We teach people how to find great properties, how to raise the finance, all the different various strategies. And we have various one-day courses, 3-day courses, home study courses. And then our main program is our Property Mastermind program, which you're very familiar with, and you speak at for us as well.
But of course, the world is a very challenging place right now. Politically, geopolitically, the property market, people tell me, is down. Interest rates are high. You can't really get the mortgages you used to get to, all sorts of things like that. So why don't you just put your feet up and don't worry about it and sit on your hands, batten down the hatches and wait for everything to come back?
Well, I'm in the fortunate position that I don't have to do anything. But I think you, like me, you don't like to do nothing. I would go crazy if I just sat on a beach street. I'd go sunburnt as well, but I'd go crazy and my wife would kill me. I'd probably kill her. And so I always want to be doing something. And actually, it's interesting. You should sometimes observe the masses and do the opposite. So right now, you're correct. Interest rates are relatively high compared to the last decade, although probably about the same rate as they were before the financial global crisis in 2008, when obviously the world property markets crashed for various reasons. And there are definitely more sellers in the UK property market right now than there are buyers. That's called a buyer's market, which actually means it's really good for buyers. So whilst many people are standing back and worried about relatively high interest rates, there are less buyers, so there's less competition. And that means you can buy property at a better price. So actually right now, as long as you know what you're doing, it's a fantastic time to be investing in property. And our clients who understand that are doing very, very well. There's some great deals out there right now.
So why is there such a love affair with property in this country?
Well, I think it goes back to, an Englishman and his home is his castle. And in many parts of Europe, there isn't this desire to own property. In Germany, for example, most people rent. But in the UK, I think people want to have their own little piece of the land, the country, the homestead, whatever you want to call it. And so it is a very aspirational thing for many people to own their own home. Now, not everyone can afford to do that. Not everyone wants to do that. And that's why there's very good, strong rental demand as well. And in a UK where we just don't have enough accommodation, and both political parties, the government, Conservatives, and the Labour Party, say that we need 300,000 new homes every year. We're building less than 200,000. So it means there's just not enough accommodation. And so whether you're buying to live in or you're buying for an investment or you're looking to rent, there is this high demand. So even though we have short-term ups and downs, which happens in any cyclical market, which property is, if you look at the long-term view, and if you've read my book, Property Magic, which I know you have, one of my 5 golden rules, number 4, is we should always look at investing for the long term. Don't worry about short-term fluctuations. If you're holding for the long term, that's how you create true generational wealth. And I know you're a very big fan of that.
Absolutely. So where did this starting point for you come from? Because there's obviously a catalyst in everybody to move from where they were to where they are now. And that's true in the whole wealth building process. It's all in transitions from one to another. How did that start for you? Tell me about what you did as a student. Where did you go? What did you do?
Well,
Where was the starting point?
I think I was quite entrepreneurial when I was younger. One of my hobbies as a youngster was magic. And I got given a Paul Daniels magic when I was 7, and I just really got into that hobby. My dad thought that was a great hobby to have, and he encouraged me to save money. He said, every penny, every pound you save, he would match, because magic tricks are very expensive to buy.
Right.
And so we would go to a magic shop called Davenport's in London once a year, buy some magic tricks, and he'd match what I say. So I guess he installed that saving principle in me. And I then actually joined a magic club attached to that magic shop for young magicians when I was about 12. And it was amazing. Although I look back now, I didn't realize at the time, that was actually my first mastermind group, because there were other young magicians and we were learning from each other, learning and progressing much quicker than we would on our own. And I started doing kids parties. And, when I was 14, 15, I'd be, Saturday afternoon doing a 6-year-old kids party. And, when you have kids and you have parties, 20 kids is noisy and hassle. So if you get someone to come along and keep them engaged for 45 minutes while you sit at the back and have a glass of wine to recover, that's a very good thing to have. And so I did pretty well doing that. And I never used to advertise, or word of mouth advertising. And so I was quite entrepreneurial then. I realized actually I was making a lot more than my friends who might start their Saturday jobs working in a newsagent or a shoe shop or whatever. So I kind of thought it was quite interesting. And I guess that's because I had specialist knowledge. I had some skills that I developed over time, and I was able to monetize that. I went to university because I was following the traditional career path. You go to a good school, you try and get good A-levels, you go to college or university, you go and get a good job, and that's what I wanted to do. And I came to university in Birmingham, 4-year course in manufacturing, engineering, business studies. I came out of university, I didn't have a job in 94. So I just did some telesales just to earn some income and show I was employable. And finally, I got what I thought would be my dream job at Cadbury's on a graduate training program. And it was the kind of the perfect job I wanted. I stayed in Birmingham. I kind of liked Birmingham. Right. And at that point, I bought a house, really for me to live in. And I was living in not such a good rental student property. So I bought a house, and two of my friends who were still at university rented rooms for me. And I kind of realized that I was living for free because my friends were covering the mortgage and the bills. I thought this is quite good. And I remember my very first landlord when I was a student. He lived in this massive house on a very posh road in Birmingham called Farquhar Road. And
sounds posh.
It was it's one of the most expensive roads in Birmingham. And when we moved into his house, he was a hands-on landlord. He'd meet the tenants, he'd do the contracts, he would go and inspect the place. He wouldn't do the maintenance. He had some people to do that, but he'd pretty much organise and arrange. He'd collect the rent, chase late rent, all that kind of stuff. So he's full-on hands-on landlord, which is not what I am, by the way. I'll come to a distinction in a minute. I'm a professional investor. He lived in this lovely house. And I remember as a 19-year-old sitting in his home with my friends, signing a contract in his big office. And I said, as a bit of a cheeky 19, I said, excuse me, I hope you don't mind me asking, this is a lovely house. What do you do for a living? And he said, well, I used to be a solicitor, and now I'm just a full-time landlord. And I didn't know what that meant. My parents, my dad was a GP, we're fairly middle class. They own their own home, so we've not rented a home before. Right. And I wasn't familiar with the unless someone teaches stuff you don't know, and no one taught me. And so I thought that's interesting, and the seed went in my head. And then when I had been in my first house for a few years, I thought, well, maybe I want to move a little bit away from the university, which is where I was living next to, and closer to Cadbury's in Bourneville where I was working. And rather than sell that first house, I decided to keep that, buy another one to move into. And that was my first proper rental in 1998. And I looked at the numbers, Kevin, and I realized I was making about £500 of profit per month for about 2 hours work, if that. And yet at Cadbury's, I was still on the graduate scheme at that point, hadn't quite finished. I was making about £1,500 a month for about 200 hours a month. And I kind of thought, hang on a minute, I love this job, but maybe I should do more of this property stuff. And I just started to buy more property.
So the chocolate tasting ran out of pleasure for you in the end,
look, I still like chocolate tasting. I was actually, this makes people really sick. I was paid extra money for a Monday morning to go and eat Cadbury's Dairy Milk chocolate and tell me if it's any good or not.
Right.
So I had to take a little test, and I got paid an extra £10 a year to be a Cadbury's chocolate taster.
Wow. Well, that's good. That looks good, doesn't it?
It's very good on the CV. It's a discussion point.
I thought about you the other day because I read something. I'm an economist, and I'm always following what's going on in a macro, the big picture thing.
Yeah.
The price of cocoa has just soared to $5,000 per metric ton.
Wow.
Right? Which is up nearly 3 times.
Yeah.
And Cadbury's little comment was, we're going to have to put our prices up.
Yeah, well, they're pretty high as it is, I think. but look, chocolate is a luxury good in a way. It shouldn't be, but it is really. It's quite expensive, and I'm not sure if it counts on the sugar tax they put onto drinks as well. It's one of those little indulgence. Chocolate will always be popular, I think. Little indulgence, little bit of pleasure.
So you made a transition from the magic. You're a wizard, Simon, and
Indeed.
you still practice that, I know.
Yes, yeah.
And then you went into employeeship.
Yes.
You did a little bit of discovery on, hang on a minute, 500 quid a month. How many hours do I have to work for that?
Yeah.
Beginning to see the difference from trading time for money to owning assets that generate wealth.
Absolutely, yeah.
Fundamental lesson that most people in the country do not learn.
Yeah.
How did you make the transition then to the distinction that you wanted to make was to, I'm a professional property investor. And then I'd like you to go and tell me how you move from owning property to teaching property.
Yeah. So what happened was I wasn't a professional investor at first. I was very much a landlord. So I was buying the properties, I was managing them, looking after myself, because that's what my landlord, you learn from people around you. That's
Exactly,
what my landlord had done. And that was great. And partly because I hadn't started, I didn't start property to replace my income, but I noticed it was a great income supplement.
Right.
Okay. So I hadn't had that distinction. It wasn't the reason I was doing. I thought I was going to stay at Cadbury's, progress through the company, become a director. That's my vision. That's what the fast track graduate scheme is all about.
Right.
And I liked Cadbury's. I liked the people. I liked the company. I liked the product. But what I realized, Kevin, I like my freedom just a little bit more. And when you work for someone and when you're a senior manager, you're not paid by the hour, you're paid a salary and you're supposed to go and do a great job. And you only get 5 weeks holiday a year, and that just isn't enough. I like my travel, I know you do as well. And because I had this alternative income coming in, I thought, what if maybe I have a bit more time freedom, I choose what I do? Mm-hmm. Now, just to fill in a little gap, one of the ways I was able to buy these extra houses was not just because I was saving money because I was living for free, but I had a part-time business. I've always been an entrepreneur running student nightclub events in Birmingham for Birmingham University students, and had money building up on my business accounts. That helped fund some of my early deals. In the early days, I didn't know about creative finance. I was using my money to put down as a deposit to buy property. So that was taking a bit of time.
Yeah.
And after about 5.5 years, it was 2001, I realized I hadn't replaced my income by then, but actually I had enough to live off. So I could give up the full-time job, stop trading all my time for money and get a whole load of time back. Now, the problem with that, Kevin, is the tasks you have expand to the time available, Parkinson's law. And so I did my kind of club stuff, and I didn't actually do that much. But one of my biggest regrets is I didn't have anyone telling me how impactful investing in property would be. It was very much a side hustle, hustle, a hobby.
Yeah.
I was just dabbling in. I was doing quite well, but I was dabbling. And I actually went on a course in 2002, a property course, first property training I'd ever done. And bear in mind, I'd left my job by then. And I had this leaflet come through my door. I was listening to, you might remember Nightingale Conants, the company that produced personal development.
Your CDs, tapes then.
Well, there were tapes originally and then CDs. I'm not sure if they're still around. Anyway, but I was into lots of tapes like Brian Tracy and Jay Abraham. So I was obviously on mailing lists and things. I had this leaflet come to my door about going on a property course. And I paid for a bit of training with Tony Robbins and courses. And I thought, okay, well, that's interesting. So I went on a 2-hour free course in Birmingham, and I sat there listening, and some of the stuff I knew, but they talked about some things that I hadn't heard about, I hadn't thought about. And I thought, that's kind of interesting. And at the end, they said, well, we've got this 3-day course in London. It was £3,000, whatever, you could take a partner. So I thought, great, I signed up, took my then partner at the time. This is in 2002.
Who ran that?
It was a company called Russ Whitney.
Yeah, American though.
American, yes. And they'd come over, they got some UK trainers. So Jill Fielding was one of the trainers. There was a guy as well, I can't remember his name, but I know Jill was definitely the trainer who did that.
Right.
And some of the stuff I knew, some of the stuff I didn't know. They talked about using other people's money to buy property, and they talked about buying on credit cards, and never thought about that. And so I came right off that course, and I actually so my partner and I at the time, we thought, well, let's move in together. So we bought a property in her name because she didn't have one. So we used her first time buyer status, got a 90% mortgage. We put down a 10% deposit on a credit card check. Never done that before, learned that on the course. We bought slightly below market value, added some value to the property. 6 months later, refinanced, paid off the credit card. So that was first no money down deal I'd ever done. I learned it from that course.
Is that when the momentum started to pick up then?
Well, it did. It did and it didn't. I came straight off the course, and I definitely took action as a result. That course was paid for itself many, many times over. But then I lost momentum. And this is the challenge I think many people find. They do some training or they get inspired, they get excited, and then life gets in the way. Yeah. And I was doing my nightclub business, etc. And I didn't know the value of investing in property. So I didn't really do it. I was just dabbling. And that's why in 2003, I went online and thought, this is really lonely. All my friends are still working at Cadbury's. Right. All my family were working, they had their own home, but not investments. I really didn't have anyone around me who could help me grow and learn. And having done lots of Tony Robbins stuff, I realized the importance of environment, getting like-minded people around you who are going to champion you and encourage you.
We really call important. That community.
Community is so important. And I had no community. Yeah. So I went online to do an internet search and there were no property networking groups anywhere in the UK. And there were business networking groups and I used to go to those and I met great power team contacts, solicitor, mortgage broker, printer for my business. But none of them really understood property or the challenges I was going through. Right. So I set up the very first networking in the UK in Birmingham. And it was just a small group of people at first, and then it started to grow.
How did you market to them then?
Word of mouth. Remember, this was before the internet.
I was going to say
just people I knew.
No social media, no internet.
No social media. No, well, there was internet, but it was very early days of internet. But no social media, no Facebook, no YouTube. It was people I knew. And I'm a big fan of networking. Yeah. And I'm a big fan of telling people what you do. And through some of my content, I just knew people through what I was doing. They knew people, and it started to grow.
So
and
how many people came to the first one?
Oh, probably as many as we get around this table. Maybe 5, I don't know.
Okay, a start though.
And then it was a start. So I knew a few people, and it got from there. And how I started trading was people say to me, Simon, how come you don't have to work? I said, well, I do work. I've got my properties. I've got my... No, you don't go to work.
Yeah.
Remember, we're talking, 20 years ago now. So there weren't YouTube videos that people did not know how to do this. So I started telling people what I had done. And that's when I realized what my passion was.
Right.
And for me, property, it's not so much about the money or owning lots of property. For me, property investing is about what property investing can do for you.
Yeah, exactly.
And what it can do for you is allow you the time, the freedom, the headspace to really work out what are you passionate about and what do you want to do. So I'm delighted to say I now do what I love to do. I teach people. Now, I'm not going to do this forever because as a creator, as you are, we kind of get bored of things sometimes. We need to move on. I think I'll always be doing some sort of teaching because I love it. And I particularly like it when people listen and take action and get results. It really annoys me when they don't take action because they're not going to get results. But I love being a little bit of a catalyst in someone changing their life. We help so many people. I get a real kick and a buzz from that.
Well, that's a really powerful thing, isn't it? Because, we're going to talk about schooling in a minute, actually, because it's interesting that your parents were really from that traditional side. You had the exposure to the rich guy and the rich place in Farquhar Lane or whatever it was.
Farquhar Road, yes.
But he never became a mentor.
No.
So nobody really became the mentor, which we pick up from Rich Dad, Poor Dad, the fact that the rich dad was a mentor. No. So you didn't have a mentor. So you became a mentor, it seems like.
Yes. Well, I didn't have a property mentor, but I had people around me who influenced me. Right. So not around me, but I would go to Tony Robbins events, and Brian Tracy and these kind of people. And so I realized the importance of mindset. And everyone thinks knowledge is and knowledge is important.
Right.
But I know people who know exactly what to do in property, Kevin, and they don't do it because they don't have the right mindset, the right belief, the right attitude, the confidence to move forward. So mindset, I think, is probably one of the most important things. So I'm always investing in myself to improve my mindset. And I have bad days.
I've noticed that about you. You do spend some money and you go off to different countries. I travel
around the world. I was restricted a little bit during COVID, and we do a lot of virtual events now, and if it's the only way you can learn, great. But personally, I like to get face-to-face in a room with people, connect with them. I just prefer that style of network. I love the energy you get from that.
Right. Yeah, likewise. So let's talk about let's keep going a little, actually, and come back to the children bit in a minute in the schooling. Because even though people, well, you said it earlier on, you live in a house, you rent a house, you probably work in a property, everything, you probably inherit a property at some point, you buy one to live in. Property weaves itself through the very fabric of our lives, but nobody teaches a thing about property and nobody teaches a thing about money.
Yeah.
So how do you feel about the fact that all of this is going on and we need life skills And children are living now, children born today will live on average to 100 years of age now. So they've got a much longer life, but nobody teaches this at all until you discover it by chance, like you did, like I did, like everybody does. What are your thoughts about that?
Well, it's going to cause a massive problem for the individuals and for society, because if we're living longer, and obviously there will be advancements in science and technology, so maybe we'll be able to, keep going longer. But as we get older, our bodies wear out. Our bodies aren't as supple as they were when we were younger. Our minds maybe not as sharp as it was as you get older. So there comes to a point where most people won't be able to work. And tragically, what happens to many people is they retire at 60, 65, 70, whatever. It's getting older and older, obviously. And many people, they've been working for 40 years doing something. And when they stop and looking to enjoy their retirement, very often, many people die within 6 months. And I think it's partly because they lose their purpose. They don't have what they were doing for 40 years, they're not doing anymore. And that's a tragedy. But if people are going to be living longer, how are they going to afford to support themselves? Now, we have a state pension here. I think it's about just over £100 a week, which is not exactly a lot of money to support yourself. And is the state going to provide for all these people who are living much longer? Who's going to pay for that? Going to be more working people, taxes? Are there going to be less people actually working because of AI? Where's all this taxes going to come from? So I think it would be very naive for someone, even someone in their 20s, to think that there's going to be someone providing for them in the future.
Yeah, the macro picture
doesn't look good. Doesn't look good.
That's why the state pension age is going back and back and back.
Well, but in theory, they try and make state pension just a little bit older than the average life expectancy.
Well, I mean, that's an interesting point. But I mean, the current state pension age is 66, right? So I think life expectancy is probably, 84, 85.
Is that much? I don't know.
Yeah. So I'm not sure it's tied to that, but it's really tied to the number of people who are taxpayers relative to the number of people who receive the money.
So think about this. If there are less taxpayers because of automation and AI,
exactly,
who's going to pay it all?
I mean, they're already trialing a 4-day week in Germany.
Yeah.
So some interesting things going on in the world. And if children live to 100, it sounds great, doesn't it? Oh, we've got longer life expectancy. Children are going to live to 100. Okay, but it means they're going to have to work till they're 80. That, to me, is a tragedy that can be avoided by understanding some of the distinctions that you're sharing, and certainly at WealthBuilders we share, which is the challenge of trading time for money instead of owning assets that generate a flow of money, which gives the freedoms that you mentioned. And everybody wants freedoms in different ways, and you've expressed how you like to do that. So I'm guessing that, the freedoms you're enjoying, you're not really going to be at a place where you just, at some age, stop.
No, well, I have lots of investments. I have property. I have some cryptocurrency. I have some shares. I have investments in businesses. So I think it's good you do need to specialize in something. But then I think you also need to diversify a bit. I was way too much in property for a number of years. But I have other investments, and you want to make sure you don't rely on just one thing. So if something happens, cryptocurrency, for example, it's just a punt. We had a very small amount of money. Well, that's just growing quite recently, but it's very small amount of money. It's a punt, right?
Yeah.
But I think having different streams of income is really important. And the problem is we are so conditioned that, you have to go and get a job and you have to trade your time for money. It takes a lot of work to get people to break free from that thinking and understand about free enterprise and having businesses and having multiple businesses. A big mistake people make, they go and set up a business, but really they're just working for a tyrant, i.e. themselves. Many people in business are working, they might be earning a good amount of money, but the amount of hours they're putting in, if you look at the hourly rate, they can make more money by flipping burgers in McDonald's. Nothing wrong with that, obviously. And you get free food for life as well. Maybe not the best food, but still. But the point is, sometimes I think people who are in a business, they don't get business. They're still just trading their time for money. And I think one of the best things you can do is actually being a CEO, bringing it back to this content we're talking about, is where you're not the person doing all the work. A CEO organizes people. They're not the person doing the work. Now, I still do things in my business I probably shouldn't do, but I can only do what I do because I've got a great team. One of my businesses is crowd property. I go to a board meeting once a month. I have a few phone calls, but that's it. I am not involved, and they probably do much better because I'm not involved. I don't interfere. And I think that's an important distinction people need to get to. If you have a business, doesn't mean you need to be the business.
Mm-hmm.
And in my training business, for many years, I was the business. We have other people now helping, but I was the business. And it's a dangerous place to be in.
So when you dropped in another business there, and I think it's important to get the distinction between one of the things we say in WealthBuilders for sure is focus your way to security, meaning having enough money to be able to give up the trading time for money piece and then diversify your way to independence and then legacy. And you're just kind of replacing or repeating some of those things that we say.
Yeah.
But your diversification, let's just go back a step then and say, well, how did you move from a place of you had the idea, you did the work on the property, you created the first networking meeting, you've now got 50 meetings across the country, typically 2,000-3,000 people coming into a meeting every month?
No, not quite. It used to be prior to COVID. It's probably about 1,800 people a month coming through.
But even so, even if there's nearly a couple of thousand people getting exposure, and you're not there speaking at every meeting, right?
No, definitely. We have a great network of hosts, people who've done our training, who've done very well, who stepped to say, hey, I'd like to run a local meeting, or they've taken over from a meeting who's kind of moved on. And so a lot of people who are working, who don't quite understand this, say, why would you share all this knowledge? Why would you teach other people? Well, it's a couple of reasons. First of all, me teaching someone else how to invest in property has no impact on me. There's so much property available. It's not like I'm kind of going to be denying myself anything. So there's no problem there. Secondly,
no win-lose scenario.
No, it's a win. It's a win-win. It's a win-win because I get paid to teach. I paid very well because we have great success for our students. So that obviously brings a good price tag. And I'm doing what I want to do. And it's interesting when I can tell when someone's still working for someone else because they don't understand that freedom and that choice that you can do whatever you want to do. If you've got your base covered, you really do have that freedom. And some people do want to sit on a beach or travel around the world or do nothing for their life. That's great. That's just not me. I don't want to do that.
Well, in some respects, the way you described your property journey at the beginning, you don't have to be the super creator, the super entrepreneur, where you've got all this inner passion that I can see from you is getting out. Even if someone wants to build property methodically, they can gradually build that up. It doesn't have to be a massive transition, does it? And
I'm not saying you should give up your job. Far from it. Actually, one of the best ways to make money is have a really well-paid job.
Get your mortgages as well, doesn't
it helps you get mortgages, exactly. And if you love what you do, great. But the challenge is, what if you can't do that job? What if something happens to you or happens to that employer or that industry? Then what do you do? So by very slowly and methodically building an alternative pension, an alternative income stream, you're just being really smart. And property is probably one of the best ways to do that. Because if you did a business, theoretically, I think when you start a business, you have to be involved. So you have to be the catalyst, etc. There's time and effort there. But eventually you can get other people out. And again, a lot of people think they have to do it themselves. They have to bootstrap it, kind of do it on the cheap. Well, actually, no, you can go and raise money, which is what I did for Crowd Property. So I bought the team in. We've raised several times so that, again, you don't have to be trading your time. It's really all comes back to understanding the value of your time. Your time is your most precious resource. You can go and make more money. You can earn more money. You can't get your time back. And I'm not perfect for any stretch of my, but I'm constantly trying to focus on what's a good use of my time and what's not a good use of my time.
And what are you doing now then? What's your focus today?
Well, I'm here. I'm here because we have a relationship and there's an opportunity to maybe talk to other people and teach them about why they should be getting in property. So I'm here investing in my relationship and I'm here investing in your customers.
What's the big picture for you? What are you seeing as the future for you in terms of what you're focusing on other than the property side? Because now as a CEO, you're the mouthpiece, you're the visionary for the business. You're not doing the training. You're not turning up at the meetings. It's interesting.
Well, I still do quite a bit of the training because I like to do it.
Oh, okay. Right,
yeah. So,
but you can choose to or not.
Yeah, we have other people doing it as well, but I do a lot of it because I love it. But you're right, I don't have to. I have other people who can do it for me. I generally don't do the network meetings. I have a great team who's running that business for me now. I like to feel as if I'm making a difference. I like to feel like I'm having an impact, and training is one of the ways I do that. I am rewriting very soon. I'll be having the next edition of my book coming out. I've got my new book coming out, all about
Property
options.
Magic, another magic.
Property Magic, yeah. And I've got Lease Options Magic coming out very, very soon as well. And I think that's a really good way to get to lots of people. and change their thinking. And because of all the conditioning people have, you need to keep on chipping away at people's beliefs and keep on giving them snippets of information, hoping at one point they'll go, hang on a minute, that kind of makes sense. Let me look into that a bit more. So I put a lot of information. So I have a podcast like you, a lot of videos out as well. And I think if you put great content out and a lot of stuff out there for free, people can really check you out before they decide to maybe come and do something further with you and invest in themselves and do some training. I think it's really important you do check people out, do your due diligence. And I think putting a lot of great content out there is a good way of giving out. And I know a lot of people watch my videos and have learned and done things from those without having to do training. But I also know when people come and invest in themselves, they become more investable. And also it speeds up and accelerates the point to which they can retire and replace their income.
Yes, because in the traditional way of building an income security, people would work for 40 years.
Yeah.
And now you and I took a lot longer than perhaps we could teach now. I think people can do it in 40 months.
Yeah, oh, definitely.
Never mind 40 years. So why not speed that up if you can? So definitely. I get that. But I do get your point about getting more information out with integrity and authenticity, because an object at rest stays at rest. We said that earlier on, but sometimes it's just the angle of the approach.
Yeah.
They, like you did when you said, oh, when I went to Russ Whitney, they framed it in a slightly different way that something dropped.
Yeah.
And that's all you really need to do that. So
human nature, sometimes we need to hear things several times before it resonates with us.
Yeah.
Or we just weren't listening first time round because other things. Now, if you read a book or watch a movie a second time round, you'll notice things you didn't the first time.
Yeah, exactly.
Same book. Why? Because, well, A, you're in a different place because you've been through it once, but also you can't take everything in first time round. And we have this thing called the reticular activating zone in our head, makes us focus in on certain things. And depending on what we're thinking about and what our goals are, we focus in on different things. And that's why it's so important, I believe, to keep working on your mindset, because as human nature is quite negative, we look for dangers. And so we look for negative things to keep ourselves safe.
Right.
There's so much false stuff that isn't really a risk, but it's perceived fear and danger. We need to cut through all of that and focus on the positive things, because otherwise, if you think about negative things, think negative things are going to happen to you. Think about positive things and manifest that positive things are going to happen to you.
Yeah, okay. So I'm getting that what the principle is then for people to choose part of their wealth building in property, and it's a easy one to replicate. It's an easier one to do part-time.
Yes.
And all of those things. But come on, Simon, with AI now taking over, why do they need to pay for education?
So most information out there is free. And sometimes people say, oh, why do you need to pay for education? And I'd say, well, I don't think the 23,000 people who are my subscribers on YouTube are all multimillionaires yet. But I've given them something. Why not? What's stopping them do it? Mm-hmm. And the thing is, first of all, knowledge alone is not enough. And sometimes there's almost too much knowledge out there that there's an overwhelm. Whereas I think when you pay to go on a course, what you're paying for is not just the 2 or 3 days you're there. You're paying for the 20 or 30 years of knowledge of the person who's given the training, and they're condensing it, distilling it down to a step-by-step process that you can follow so you don't have to work it out yourself. Whatever I want to learn. So I'm learning about AI myself. I don't want to go and try and watch YouTube videos. I've paid to learn from someone who's really good, and I'm speeding up my learning curve. Anything I want to learn about, I'll find someone anywhere in the world who I think knows what they're doing, have got great results, and more importantly, they've taught other people to do what they do. Because there's a big difference between someone knowing something and someone being able to transfer that knowledge in a good way to someone else so it's applicable.
Yeah. And it's so obvious now when people are successful at that because of things like Trustpilot, you can see whether there's successes as well. And look, I agree wholeheartedly with your view. I share that view that education is the precursor to all forms of wealth building, but it's only one step in that process.
It is.
And we've mentioned some of the other things like good coaching, good communities, good connections to other people. I think you and I subscribe to a point of view, which is the who, not how principle.
Definitely,
Do you want to explain that?
Yeah, so a good friend of mine who I met through networking, actually, Dr. Benjamin Hardy, he was in a group called Joe Polish 25K Club, which is a group I used to fly to America. I stopped during COVID because they did virtual things, but fly to America 3 times a year just to sit in a room of really smart people, and they'd talk about business and all sorts of things, really. And this one event, I went in and they tell you where to sit, and I sat down next to this guy, and very young guy, he was less than 30 at the time, just got on really well, talked to him. Turns out he was doing his PhD in psychology and writing a book, and he got up and did a little talk at this particular presentation I was at, and it blew me away. I thought it was amazing. He knows so much about this topic, and I love mindset. So I invited him to come over to the UK. We flew him over to come and speak at Property Magic Live, which is one of my big annual events. Right. And it was his first ever paid speaking gig. I've got that little claim to fame, and now he's got 5 or 6 international bestsellers, and one of his books is Who Not How. So written in conjunction with Dan Sullivan, who's the founder of Strategic Coach.
Another good CEO.
Another good CEO, yeah, definitely. The concept is, well, a lot of people think they need to do everything themselves, whereas actually there are some things you're really good at, some things you're not so good at. So why not focus on things you're really good at and get other people to help you with other things? If you find people who've got a passion and they buy into what you're doing as well, you can get a much better result. So for example, I know you have Christian, who helps you with all these podcasts. He loves this, he's great at this, and so he does a lot of the work behind the scenes for you, so you can focus on being the host and the presenter, right? Without worrying about all the other stuff. Because we only have a certain amount of bandwidth to actually get things done.
Yeah.
So by finding other people, other team members, so rather than think about how do we do that, it's who could we get to. So it's a great book, Who Not How, by Dr. Benjamin Hardy and Dan Sullivan.
I think it's a great book, and I've read it too. And the way we articulate that is whenever you're encountering a problem on your way to building wealth, that's a how problem.
Yes.
Reach out to a who, and what we're trying to do is people like you are who's. So Christian is a brilliant who, works with us at WealthBuilders, but just try and build a big black book of outstanding people. I'm going to actually take a sidestep here, because I'm going to just talk about the business a little more, because some of the principles we talk about, definitely in WealthBuilders, I want to see if you resonate with them. When we're looking at good businesses, we're saying, number 1, be outstanding in your niche.
Yep, definitely.
Number 2, the business got to work without you. Agree with that one?
Yeah, definitely, yeah.
Number 3, wherever possible, create recurring income.
Yeah.
I want to challenge you a little on this, because I've seen your business model and I understand what it does.
Yeah.
You give lots of brilliant free content. You encourage people to come in and sample some of those things to make sure they resonate. And
yes,
I like
correct.
that about you. And then they pay a bit more to do more, and then they can invest and go deep and deep and deep and deep, including your 12-month mastermind program.
Yeah.
Where's the recurring income, Simon?
So it's a really good point, actually. It's the one flaw in my business model. I'll be perfectly honest about that. I realized when we did the very first mastermind, because right, and by the way, mastermind over the last 17 years has evolved. What we teach now is very different from what we first taught, because the market's moved on, different strategies and things. But when I did it, I thought, right, I'm going to teach people everything they need in a year, and we're going to support them and coach them, etc. So they won't need anything after that. So we didn't. Because some people said at the end of the year, what do we do now? I said, well, there isn't anything. You've got it all. You don't need me. And we still had PIN. They could go to PIN, still have a community. But I hadn't really realized at that time, even though I'd done Mastermind, how important that higher level community was.
Right.
So now we have our Mastermind, our graduate program. So we look after people ongoing, and some people dip into that when they need it. Some people don't need it because they've got everything they need from the year program. And also we are creating, so we have a little bit of a community and a residual thing with PIN. People can join PIN as a membership thing. But we are creating a new membership program that will have all sorts of resources in there that's a continuity program for the business. And when you sell a business, and remember, this is not my business anymore, but when you sell a business, if you have a recurring income in the business, you have a much better multiplier on that.
Exactly. According to John Warrilow, who wrote a great book called Built to Sell.
Yeah.
Probably when I interviewed him, he said the number one factor in the valuation of any business is the predictability of the recurring income.
Definitely, yeah.
And it's good that you've been humble enough to admit to that.
I try to get everything right,
Yeah. But how did that affect the valuation of your business? You mentioned a couple of times, and maybe you could explain. It's not your business anymore. So you must have gone through a process. Walk me through the process.
Yeah, so in 2020, when the world was falling apart and everyone was at home and everyone had a lot of time on their hands, and sometimes they had lots of money on their hands and they couldn't go out and spend it, anyone who had an online business actually did very, very well. and we have a lot of home study programs, and we do lots of webinars and things. And so our business actually shot up. We had 2020 and 2021 were actually our biggest years, our most profitable years, because we didn't have the cost of running hotel events because we couldn't. And hotels, people sometimes go to an event and they look at how much you make from the ticket money and think, oh, they make what's, but they don't realize how expensive it is to hire hotels, the sound people, the crew, the hotel rooms, you have to have your team, etc. So they're very expensive.
Hundreds of pounds a day, couldn't it?
It's a lot. It can be a lot. And sometimes we were looking at we're doing an event later in the year, and we're looking at paying a day delegate cost plus £15,000 per day for the room, and other costs. So it is a really expensive thing to do. We didn't have any of those costs. So actually, it was a really profitable year. And you're familiar with, obviously, Roger Hamilton, who's the creator of Wealth Dynamics, which is an amazing test. I know you talk to people about that, which helps you understand what's your flow and what's your natural talents. I had been a client of Roger for many years. He was one of my mentors. And so he knew my business very well. And for a couple of years, he'd been talking about, he was thinking about, do we want to sell the business? And I said, no, I don't really want to sell, etc. And then in 2020, when all of the online businesses, the valuation shot up massively because of what was happening, he came to me and said, Simon, I know we talked a few times about this before, but I would like to buy your business. I said, well, I don't know if it's for sale really. And he explained what he was doing. He was doing a big roll-up on the New York Stock Exchange, doing an IPO, initial purchase offering, where you float the company and you need a certain turnover to it. So he wanted to buy my business and a few others to have enough of a turnover to be able to justify to do that. So I was made a really good offer. And he said, look, I want you to stay around for a few years to kind of guide and grow the business. And I was happy to do that because I like what I do. And so I got some cash and I got some shares, and that was how that all came about, really. And there was a long due diligence process. They looked at everything we do and all our books and our accounts, and the fact we've been running for so long. And we have, although we didn't have a recurring model really at that time, we had a lot of track record. And I think track record is really important in a business. It gives people credibility, and they need to make sure that's replicable, and you have systems to keep that new business coming through. Yeah. And we just got a very good valuation. So I got a good offer I couldn't really refuse, I guess.
Okay. And how's it turned out?
Well, it's never quite what you expect. When you don't own it anymore, a lot of decisions that are not mine. And in a way, that's good. I have a managing director who runs a business now, and some of the things are not quite the way I do it, but it's not my choice anymore. And actually allows me to focus on what I love to do, which is the content. So there were some really good things. The share price hasn't performed as well as it should do for various reasons. So, that's not great, but I'm happy where I am at the moment. I'm going to be staying on probably a little bit longer than I expected, right. Because we're doing really well, and I'm putting things in place for the day I don't have to be there. Because at the moment, it's not a business that runs completely without me. It's not, and it's not a true business. You get a definition earlier, something that doesn't require you. Well, it does require me, but that's because I make it require me because I like to be part of it.
Yeah, but somebody get in your own way, don't you?
Absolutely, you do. That's a great saying. And you need to get out of your own way if you really want to grow and eventually sell a business. But Michael Gerber from the E-Myth talks about either you're buying a business or you're selling it, which means either you prepare it so you could potentially sell it. If not, you're buying it because you have to be in it. You're buying it every day. You have to be there running it. And so big fan of that, and putting systems and processes in place so you don't have to be there if you don't want to be there.
Yeah, and not every business that is ever sold is sold because there's a recurring income. Many businesses don't have a strong recurring income model, but they've got other things in place.
Yeah, so having a good, loyal customer base. If you imagine, in our community, you have some people who they might read the book, they come and do our 3-day accelerator course. Great, they're on Mastermind. We also have people who go to PIN meetings for years and years and years. Not right then. Suddenly they decide, okay, actually I'm going to come and do Mastermind now. So the fact we've got that base and such a good reputation, that has a lot of value in itself.
Yeah. But you've diversified business too. You mentioned a business earlier on called Crowd Property. Do you want to describe that?
Yeah, so I think it's important when I'm teaching other people, I still need to be investing myself, and I am investing because you've got to keep up to date. I could have stopped back in 2003 when I replaced my income. Obviously, I have a lot higher income requirement now.
Well, you're married now.
Yeah, exactly. It's a lot more now. But I think it's good to keep up to date. And so back in about 2010, I started doing some bigger developments. I wasn't doing just single houses. I was taking care homes and creating them into blocks of 20, 45 units, whatever it might be. And that takes a lot of money. And actually development finance can be very tricky to get. It's very complicated, and development finance people generally don't understand property. They're finance people, not property people. So it's kind of frustrating. So I was using other people's money. That's what I teach my students. I do what I teach my students. So there were people out there who've got cash and more cash than they need themselves. It might be in their business, might be in their pension, might be in their bank account, whatever, might have inherited it. And I was giving people a great return on my borrowing, typically chunks of 50K, multiples of that, and doing my development sometimes entirely cash. And what I was doing was something that you talk about. I was offering people many different returns on investment. So getting a return on their money, but also they get a return on investment into their knowledge because they can look over my shoulder and learn what I was doing. We teach our students to do this, yeah. So I've been doing that for well over a decade. And then in 2013, I went to an event, actually a Roger Hamilton event. It was a business event, so I'm always going and educating myself. And that particular one, I was actually on a panel being interviewed by Roger and a couple other people about our businesses, and I was talking about PIN. And there was someone on the panel called Simon Dixon, who had a business called Bank to the Future.
Yes, I remember him.
And it was a business that helped new businesses raise money for funding. So they were doing EIS schemes, which is the entrepreneur investment schemes, enterprise investment scheme, where you could raise money for a business and people invest, they get some tax credits and things. It's a good scheme. And he was saying how they were raising money for businesses, and he was talking about crowdfunding and peer-to-peer lending. And I'd heard a bit about it, but it was very early days back then. I didn't really understand it. And I thought, wow, I wonder if instead of working with, 10 to 20 people on a development project, we're all putting in chunks of 50K, maybe there are people on my database who don't have 50K to invest, but they'd love to get a better return on the money than they're getting in the bank. And also there were lots of my students who are doing mastermind who are using their own money, then running out of their own cash and had great developments. I thought, wouldn't it be good if we could create a platform that's FCA regulated, which has to be, takes care of all the due diligence, all the legals, all the admin, and people, we find great property projects, we put them on the platform, people with money can come and they can pledge against different projects or even use their pensions, etc., and they get a great return, and we take a first charge security on that property, so the best kind of security you can on behalf of all the lenders. And it was just an idea back in 2013, and I thought, yeah, I've got the community to support that. I've got the people with the deals. I've got people in PIN who might have money. So because of that business, I was able to launch this new business back in 2013. And we did a raise. We went on to Bank to the Future and raised £150,000 on an EIS, a seed EIS actually. So those people who put money in have done pretty well. And that's how we got the business off the ground. And I knew some people with projects and we encouraged people to put money in. And to date, I'm not sure what the latest figure is, but we funded, I think it's over £850 million gross development value of projects. So that's not the loans we put, but the value of the projects we funded, over 800. It's getting close to £1 billion worth of projects in a 10-year period, which is pretty amazing.
It is, and it's got an incredible track record of repaying as well.
It has, yeah. And property things go wrong sometimes, and particularly during COVID, there were lots of projects delayed. And we've got some projects that are delayed, but all the lenders get penalty interest. And out of about 400 projects I think we've done now, I think we've had one or two where there's been a little bit of capital lost, which still is pretty low percentage really. But we encourage people to diversify. So if you're diversified over a number of investments, you're still going to get a very, very good return. So yeah, it's pretty good. And we've got private individuals who put money in. We've got family offices. We've got people who put a pension in. And also we have several institutions. Our biggest has put 100 million in. So there are lots of diverse streams of funding within that. In case any of them ever dry up, we'll always be able to fund good, profitable projects.
And that has nothing to do with the sale of the business.
No, that's completely separate business.
Standalone business.
Standalone business. Obviously, we were able to launch that through my other business. So they're connected businesses in that. A lot of our students became borrowers for crowd property, and a lot of our PIN people became lenders, but it's now much bigger than PIN. It's a totally separate company, separate shareholding, and I'm still the majority shareholder, but I have people running the business for me, so I have very little to do with it, which is great.
How do you see the exit on that?
The exit, we are building to sell that eventually, and I think probably, who knows, but I think a bank will probably come along. If you imagine we've got a big lending book where we're paying a high rate of interest to all our lenders. A bank that's going to have a much lower cost of borrowing could come in and potentially add tens of millions of profits instantly to their baseline. So that's got to be a pretty good multiplier on that business.
Well, it sounds like an interesting opportunity, because if you're paying people who one would perhaps call them angel investors or something similar, but they need a higher return on their investment because there's no retail throughput of huge volumes of money. But banks have got that, and therefore the arbitrage or the difference in value is easier for them, isn't it? So I can easily see how that could be a banking exit at some point.
Absolutely. And a fully systemized business, it's prop tech. So
and you're not even in the way.
Not even in the way. And I learned that from Roger about getting out of the way. So I was in the early stage, got it set up. We got the things like made it possible for pensions to it. So I did a lot of the initial stuff with a team. Wasn't me on my own. We invested. We brought some people in to get there quicker. And we weren't the only people doing it. There were a couple of people at the same time, but those have fallen by the wayside now. No one has been as successful as we have. And that's credit to the team who are running the business.
Well, it's often the way, though, isn't it? When pioneering businesses create something new, you get lookalikes and copycats.
Yep.
But for some reason, somebody survives and then thrives because the others fall by the wayside.
Sometimes it's good not to be the pioneer, because the pioneer makes the mistakes. And there's that saying about if you're the frontier, you end up getting arrows in your back.
Right.
So there's an advantage to that. But then again, there's something to be the first. We were the first property network. We're probably the first remaining crowdfunding. So I've done quite a lot of innovation within the property industry over the years.
But that probably comes from uniquely you, because you've got that creative wealth dynamic, so to speak.
Yes.
That ability to be thinking big picture all the time. And that, I'm sure your brain never switches off, right?
No, it doesn't. It's very hard for me to relax and unwind, much to my wife's upset.
So how is the work-life balance?
Not as good as I like. I love what I do. I'm probably a workaholic, Kevin. And workaholics, we have that excuse of, I love what I do. It's getting better. We have lots of nice holidays, and I have 2 puppies now that keep us busy as well. They're like our kids, really.
Yeah.
So it's getting better. And I have actually committed to my wife, and I've said this to a couple of people now, April 2027.
Okay.
I don't think I'm going to be doing my property business anymore. It will be running, it'll be still going, but I don't think I'll be that involved by then, because it'll be totally set up, be other people running it for me. But I'll be doing some sort of other training, I'm sure, because I love doing training.
What's the significance of the date?
I'll be 55 at that age. So I will be 55 in 6 months or so by then. My birthday's August. And I just, you know what? And I feel as you get older, I don't quite have the same energy I used to have. And so it's important to make sure you don't wear yourself out. I want to make sure I live a very, very long time. I'm not sure I'll go get to 100, but who knows? And I could never.
Dan Sullivan is preparing himself to live to 146.
Yeah, something like that. I think 127 was because he has this. Well, no, he might be 146, but I think I decided 127. There's this thing called the life extender that he at XIT does, and so I'd like to be over 100. I'd like to get that telegram from the monarchy, if there is a monarchy by that point. Who knows?
Well, that will be a nice telegram to get.
Yeah.
Talking about telegrams, which are often short and sweet. Let's bring this to a conclusion. I'm sure people will appreciate we kind of rambled through a whole range of different things, including property and business and people not taking action and some lessons that are embedded in there. I'd encourage people to listen to this more than once to see if they can get a distinction. But summarize the biggest mistakes you've made that people could definitely go, if I could go back, what would be the big mistakes you would say? No, I wouldn't do that again.
Keeping it short and sweet, we haven't got enough time to talk about all my mistakes, Kevin.
Well, a couple.
But I'll give you a few. So a property mistake was, and I've kind of touched this, but I want to reinforce because it's so important. When I was investing at first, it was very much a hobby. It was a part-time activity. And I did not realize how significant property investing would be because I didn't have anyone like me teaching me. So I try and instill in my clients, get on with this, just put some time, and it does take some short-term sacrifice, but to some time and effort into this, get your income set up within a couple of years, then you got the rest of life to do whatever you want.
Well, that's a practical lesson. And so, anything else? Yeah.
Also in my business, I've been a bit too trusting, I think.
Yes.
I think we kind of like to think people are like us. And so I think it's important to, make sure you do your due diligence and research on people. and check people out properly. A couple of mistakes I've made, you have agreements and sometimes you need to put things, always you need to put things in writing.
Yeah.
It's a document thing. That's a big mistake I see. And we tell our people, even if you've got a partnership with your relationship partner, put it in writing what you're doing, because sometimes relationships don't last, So that's one lesson. And then we touched on it again, but it's a really important lesson. You need to value your time. If you really want to be successful, whatever you're doing, whether you're in business, whether you're in property, value your time. It's the most important asset. So don't try and do everything yourself. Think about who are the who's who could help you, and try and delegate things out. So you're focusing on the things that you're really good at and where you add the most value, and get people to do everything else for you.
Cool. And as I said at the very beginning, this is the very first in a series of CEO to CEO head-to-head conversations. If you were having a CEO conversation with someone else across a table, who would you want that to be with?
Well, someone who I admire definitely from a young age has been Richard Branson.
Who doesn't? And
I was fortunate enough to go on a business trip to Necker Island with a group of people and meet Richard. And it's a trip he does. Anyone can pay to go to Necker Island, but there's no guarantee Richard, and he doesn't actually live there anymore. He lives on Mosquito Island, which is next door now. But at the time he was living on Necker, and this particular trip, they pay more money to go to make a very big contribution to Virgin United, which is this charity, so that he's there for the week. And he likes meeting entrepreneurs and things anyway. And so that was really interesting. And meeting him, he's actually a very quiet person. He has this big extrovert kind of character, party, center of the party, but actually he's quite a shy person. But actually I almost learned more by speaking to his kind of resort manager, who we did a Q&A with, who's worked for Richard running Necker Island for many, many years, and just understanding the way Richard works. And he has a great philosophy. He has a real work-life balance. So he works in the morning. On Necker Island, you're not allowed to work in the afternoon. You have to be off. You have to be enjoying the water sports or by the pool, whatever. So I think that's a lesson for him, life balance, really. But I think he's a great CEO in that he's not the person doing the work. He's the figurehead. Yeah. He's the brand. He's the culture and the ethos. But he has all these people below him who run the businesses, and he pretty much just kind of does the PR, basically. He turns up, smiles, and and he's the thought behind it. And obviously he has input into the businesses, but he's not running the businesses. Right. And it's a huge distinction. A CEO shouldn't be doing the do. You have the lieutenants doing the do for you. And you are there orchestrating the army. And that's what you should be doing as a CEO.
Well, I think Roger Hamilton puts it that way, doesn't it?
He does indeed.
You're the orchestra with the back to the audience. And
yes.
You're doing that work. Well, thank you for orchestrating yourself to get here today.
My pleasure.
I see you're starting to fur up the beard. And
I've actually just went to the barber to actually trim it down, actually. But yeah, this is the cut down version.
All right. Well, very, very much a Richard Branson lookalike now. So, Simon, thanks for coming today. And I appreciate you sharing.
Thanks so much, Kevin.